All right, guys, so yesterday I went over my biggest losers of this recent conference realignment summer. Well, now I am going to go over the biggest winners. I would say this list is fairly obvious, but I'm going to give my explanations, and we're going to kick this off. There's probably like 7 or 8 different teams on this list, but I'm going to say the number one biggest winner, and I think it's fairly clear, it is Oregon. Because when you look at Oregon, their program, the NIL money, keeping Bo Nix, the football is on the rise. Them getting into the Big Ten, you could do this a 1A, 1B with Washington, but I just think it's so important for Oregon. What a massive coup by them to get into the conference. We had talked about the West Wing last year, and it finally comes to fruition. But this Oregon team, in this day and age with how college football is, the Nike money, the designs on the uniforms, this is a rising program. They've spent some big money on recruits. They've spent a lot of money on transfer portal kids. And now they're in one of the biggest conferences with even more money coming when they do become full-time members. You're looking at a payday of around 70 to 80 million per year based off the ridiculously lucrative TV deal they will be receiving. So I'm putting Oregon above Washington. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to talk about Washington. They're my number 2 biggest winner, but I just think Oregon, them getting into the Big Ten, leaving the dying Pac-12, it is a great move, and based off of their program, the way they're throwing around money, and also getting a new athletic facility right next to their stadium, they're on the rise, and now they're in one of the Big 2 conferences. They have to be the number 1 biggest winner. The number 2 biggest winner, it is Washington. You could say it's a 1A, 1B type scenario with them in Oregon, but I'm going to put them at number 2. I do think for a team like Washington, it's going to be very hard for them to make the playoff. Even though it is a 12-team expanded playoff, it's going to be very hard for them to make the playoff consistently based on how loaded the Big Ten is. But you do also have to factor in the Big Ten is so massive now. Technically, you could miss out on facing, if you are a Washington or Oregon, you could miss out on facing Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, all within the same year. So maybe they'll get a lucky schedule. But the reason I'm putting them at number 2, joining this conference, it's certainly going to pretty much immediately signal there's going to be less success overall for their program. I'm sure their AD, none of their, advisors care about that considering the ridiculous amount more money they're going to be making. But when you look at their recruiting compared to Oregon, you look at the way they use their NIL, they're in it a little bit, but they just don't have as much money as Oregon. So I do think it will be harder for them to compete in the Big Ten. They should be really good this year in the Pac-12 with what they're returning, possibly with 2 or 3 first-round picks, a really good quarterback, some really good receivers, a really good pass rusher. But for Washington, I would say they're the second biggest winner. I mean, it's just night and day. The conference change going from a dying Pac-12 with a $30 million, actually not even a $30 million, like a $24 million TV deal through Apple. I mean, if you guys want to know about streaming, they've been announcing these games on Peacock, and people are losing it because they cannot stand streaming. And even as like a younger person, I'm admitting, yes, streaming sucks. It's like I get into arguments with other younger people. Streaming sports is just not ethical. It doesn't make sense because people go to bars to watch games, things like that. What if it buffers? What if it lags? It's terrible. That's one of the big reasons Oregon and Washington were putting an emphasis on, listen, we got to get into the Big Ten. I do think both of them, they already knew they were vetted last year by the Big Ten, but the Big Ten at that time had a different commissioner, and they were on the verge of joining. I think the Big Ten told them, we want to create a West Wing because we want to mitigate travel. Just wait a year, and you're going to be in. So Oregon, number 1, biggest winner. Washington, number 2, because I do think Washington will find it a little bit tougher to compete in the Big Ten Conference with the way recruiting is, possibly going on the road at Michigan, at Ohio State, at Penn State, and then you're also going to have to deal with Oregon probably every year. Those teams will be facing each other because you want to mitigate the travel issues between the, West Wing schools. They'll all be facing each other. other. But those are the two biggest winners. The number three biggest winner, so I'm going to lump the four corner schools together, but you can make an argument that honestly Colorado should probably be number three. I mean, Colorado's just been such a dead-in-the-water football program and basketball. Well, I guess maybe their basketball program is coming back a little bit. I take that back. The basketball program's coming back, and obviously now they do have Deion Sanders, but if you were to tell me towards the end of last year, Colorado is like a dying star compared to where they are right now, getting Deion Sanders, being the first of the four corner schools to make the jump, I'm lumping Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah together as the number three biggest winner, but you could make a case Colorado should be standalone. Boulder's not the best TV market. They did a really good job getting into a Power 4 conference. And, you know, the Big 12, it's not an ACC situation. This is going to be a Power 4 conference for the foreseeable future. They will be getting teams into the playoffs. They will be very likely having an auto bid unless they change that format. These four teams, when you look at Arizona, I mean, Arizona's got a really good basketball program, to be completely honest. Their football team's really tailed off. You look at Arizona State, really not great right now in either football or basketball. And then you look at Utah, who unfortunately just doesn't bring much in terms of, you know, TV revenue, eyeballs. I think all four of those teams should be very happy about this. There is, you know, some people within Arizona State and within Utah, they were pretty pissed off that they had to join the Big 12. They wanted to stay in the Pac-12. But listen, it is what it is. The Pac-12 is dying. You got to move and really evolve, and that's what these teams did. So I would say it's a tie between those four teams, but you could make an argument just based off of how horrible Colorado has been. They really landed on their feet. And them, getting Deion Sanders, it's just such an amazing move. Even if Deion Sanders is only going to be there 2 or 3 years, from what they were, you have to take this. Beggars cannot be choosers. You're not just going to build up your program, overnight like this. They're getting so much publicity, and it is good for them. The fourth biggest winner, I'm going to go with SMU. So I think SMU is in a pretty good spot to join a Power 4 conference next year, depending on what happens with the ACC. But SMU, they've gotten some good news. Apparently, they're willing to join a Power 4 conference without, any type of TV money the first 4 or 5 years. Their boosters are going to pay for it, and there's already been the rumor that they could possibly be joining the ACC, depending on what happens to a few of those schools if Clemson and FSU can get out of it. I also think when you look, they are a perfect fit for the Big 12. I don't know if the Big 12 wants them, but SMU has positioned themselves going into the summer of 2024. They're going to have a real good chance to join a Power 4 conference. They've got their name in the news. You have TCU, who seems a little bit scared of them because they're recruiting better. They're utilizing NIL through the transfer portal. They are a winner right now. Even though they didn't join a Power 4 conference, they're still getting their name out there. And I do think they're going to be in a Power 4 conference eventually. The number 5 biggest winner is UConn. So UConn, another team, looks like, they're staying in the Big East right now, but they are a team that the Big 12 has talked about possibly adding. UConn seems to keep coming up in discussions, and it would not surprise me at all if they found themselves in the Big 12 next year with their basketball program. And if you're UConn, you have to like what's going on right now, because let's be honest, your football program is just not good. Now, I guess you had a little bit better year last year, but it is a very, very, when you look at their attendance, you look at their stadium, for them to be getting these type of potential offers from the Big 12. I know the Big 12 said they're done for now, but still, it's a really good sign moving forward if you do want to join a Power 4 conference and possibly get a bigger payday. They are the number 5 biggest winner. The number 6 biggest winner is just the Big Ten Conference overall. So now the Big Ten has such an expanded footprint. The only area they really don't have is like down south with Florida, and maybe they end up getting that. But just creating the West Wing, making the conference at least a little bit more bearable when you look at it, in terms of a map. Originally with just USC and UCLA, it was really ridiculous, but Oregon and Washington are just such solid programs. These teams, normally you'll always see Oregon inside the top 25. Washington, every other year, they're a very stable, good program. You're just adding good football teams to your conference, unlike the Big 12. And listen, the Big 12, they keep expanding. That's good. But look at what the Big 12 is adding. Arizona really hasn't been good in football. Arizona State really hasn't been good in football. Colorado's been horrible. Yeah, Utah's been good, but when you compare like what the Big Ten is doing with USC, who is now with Lincoln Riley a perennial top 10 team, you look at Oregon, you look at Washington, they are adding beef, really quality teams, and they haven't added Stanford or Cal. We'll see if they decide to do that next year, but the Big Ten's got to be a huge winner for expanding and becoming one of the big two. They've got the massive TV deal. And then the seventh biggest winner, I'm just going to say the Big 12 Conference in general for really just stabilizing, and now they have expanded even further. The thought process now, will they go possibly two different routes next year? Actually, they could go a number of different ways. They could go Washington State, Oregon State. They could go San Diego State, UConn. They could go SMU. There's a lot of different options for the Big 12, but you have to say, because they keep expanding, because they're a guaranteed Power 4 conference, even if it goes down to a Power 3 conference, they would be in good position to add some of those mid-tier ACC schools if the ACC has something drastic happen to them. But those would just be my biggest winners of the conference realignment period, with Oregon and Washington leading the way. Guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.